Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to yet another CHRO South Africa webinar. I'm your host, Ngulanka Binde, and today we're going to be talking about navigating uncertainty, managing the employee experience in a turbulent economic environment. Now, I'm sure everybody is very much in tune with the challenges that we're all facing as people and employees. Whether it's load shedding, I stay in 4 ways and we had no water the whole day yesterday. Prices are through the roof, petrol. So as employees, we are going through it. And today we're going to be talking to some representatives from Microsoft South Africa, namely Colin Erasmus, who is the Modern Work and Security Business Group Director, as well as Nick Keane, who's the Director of Modern Work at Microsoft South Africa. And both of them are going to be sharing some very interesting findings on, firstly, the Microsoft Work Trends Report, which has some very interesting insights on what it means to be an employee, what people want out of the world of work in today's environment. And then Nick Keane will be taking us through a demo of Microsoft Viva, which is a product that can transform your whole organization's employee to your whole organization's approach to employee experience. And I think at the end of this conversation, what we hope to achieve is to have a better understanding of what it means to manage the people agenda in today's post-pandemic work environment. I'd like you to please introduce yourselves in the chat. And if possible, get your questions and comments in throughout the conversation, and we will revisit those as we approach the end of the conversation. Now, I'm going to hand over to Colin, who is going to start us off with the findings of the 2023 Work Trends Report. Colin?
Thank you so much, Ngula. Always good to speak to this audience. I think maybe just as we always do, just a quick thumbs up. Everyone can see my screen and everyone can hear me. We're going to go, Ngula, because I've got about 20 minutes and I don't want to steal any of Nick's time, because I think it really is also about what technology is actually brought to this discussion. So I'm going to go through the journey of the Work Trend Index and what we've actually seen over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. If you would allow me. And then I want to end on the latest findings out of the Work Trend Index. And this has actually just been released on the 22nd of September. So very, very fresh. I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I think we've seen some of this data before, but this is where we started. So when we really released the first major Work Trend Index about 2 or 3 years ago, sort of halfway through the pandemic, this is what we were seeing. We were seeing this concept of what we call the hybrid paradox, which really was at the time, people were saying that they loved the flexibility that they had under the lockdowns, under the pandemic. So you'll see there 73% of people said they wanted to remain flexible. They loved that flexibility. But at the same time, 67%, a very similar amount of people were actually saying we miss the in-person contact. And this was sort of the first thinking and was the first data that came out of the Work Trend Index about 2 years ago. And that led us to think differently and actually thought differently about the models and the new operating models that we spoke about at the time that we were advising our customers to look at. And we adopted this ourselves internally within Microsoft. Now, those 3 models really, or the model really had 3 pillars to it. People, and people was and then became the center of everything that we were discussing at the time, very specifically the well-being of individuals and putting them first. The next one was really places, and this was a bit different. This was about how do we redesign places either at home or at work to make sure that people felt included, and to do things like equip boardrooms with technology in a different fashion, so that somebody that was in a boardroom had a same or similar experience to somebody that was online. And in fact, this technology from a Microsoft standpoint is something called Teams meeting rooms. And this really does allow people to go into a room, connect seamlessly, new technology like front row. So if you have a big screen to really be able to visualize the person that is on the call, and things like even directional microphones. So when somebody's speaking, the camera obviously zooms in on the individual, but also that the sound is coming from where the person is more or less on the screen. So this was the places. And this also led to discussions around technology. We actually, I did a session with Tech Central yesterday, and we were talking about how technology has changed in laptops as well, to allow this sort of thing to happen. So the microphone needs to be better than what we used to have. The speakers, as an example, cameras. Many years ago, when people were choosing phones, in fact, it is very much like that today. If you look at the research, people are choosing phones based on the camera quality, as opposed to potentially how quick the phone is. And then the last one within this new model was the processors. And that was really about how do we, in this hybrid environment, digitize our processes. As you can imagine, if you had a process that relied on a physical signature, this became an issue. So this was really what we saw out of the first work trend index, and was around that hybrid paradox. When we then moved to the second work trend index, and not the latest one, the one just prior to this one, there were 5 major trends that were identified. So this was about 6 months after the first one, and we'd actually obviously been through a little bit more. We were now understanding what hybrid work potentially meant, and these were the 5 major trends. Now, this really spoke to what we called the worth it equation. And what people were starting to say, and what employees were starting to say, is make it worth it for us to come to work. And I'll give you a practical example, and we have it at Microsoft as well, where people were now saying, well, I've been in lockdown for 1.5 years, 2 years potentially. We've been working in a hybrid fashion. I've kitted myself out the house. So I now have 2 screens at the house. I now potentially have a different microphone setup, or whatever it may be. And people were saying, what I have at work is not the same as what I have at home. In fact, what I have at home is better. So even things like broadband, the pervasive nature of broadband now, people are now having 200 meg lines, 500 meg lines at the house, and it was very quick. Go back to work, and I'm now sharing a 500 meg line, and it's a bit different. So the worth it equation became quite a discussion, and in fact is still quite a discussion. There was also a disconnect that we saw, and you'll see that in the latest stats as well, between managers, leadership, and employees. And managers felt like they were wedged in the middle, because leadership had one view of the world, employees had a different view of the world, and the managers were trying to manage this dichotomy as well. So that is something that came out in quite a big way. And then the last one, I won't touch on all of them, but the last one was quite interesting, and this one's also come out in the latest one, is how do we rebuild social capital in a hybrid world? So I go back and I look at my own teams, and I look at the teams that I've been in Microsoft. So in the past, 5-6 years ago, we wanted to get together as a team. We wanted to bond a little bit. We maybe booked a venue, and we went and did a team building exercise. Now, that's okay if we're all present and if we're all working from the office potentially. When you now have a team that is potentially split, with people coming to the office and half the people being online, how do I rebuild that social capital within that environment? So that also became quite interesting. So this was the second set of trends that we started to see. I wanted to touch on just very briefly as well, from within that same survey, very specific information that came out around frontline workers. Now, this is an area that Microsoft started to look at very seriously over the last couple of years. And what is interesting is that, and the audience must be able to tell us more, but that about 2/3 of the workforce are actually frontline workers. And we specifically did a survey, and we know that under COVID, frontline workers became so important to us. These are the people, by the way, if you think about it, that represent our brands. They are the first person that a customer potentially walks into. If it's a retail type organization, walk into a store, these are the people that are actually representing your brand. They're the first people that somebody's speaking to. Are these people equipped with the technology to have these discussions with customers? Do they know where do they know what stock is on hand? Do they know what sales look like? How do we enable these individuals to actually learn and grow? So technology became quite interesting in this space. So I'll just share with you the three key findings that came out of this specifically for frontline workers. So the first finding that we had was that culture had become really big amongst the current frontline workers. And what we also saw, if you look at the stats, is that frontline workers very specifically bonded with their colleagues. And you're going to see, you can actually see when I show you the latest stats out of the latest work trend index, this is becoming quite pervasive across the board. And we're going to get back to that worth it equation. But you'll actually see there that you'll see that frontline workers bond very closely with their colleagues, almost 76%, and that was their worth it equation. And we also saw out of the report that there was a major disconnect between frontline workers and leadership within the organization, as well as not feeling valued if they weren't in that management chain. So that was the first major trend that came out from a frontline worker standpoint. The next one was the optimism around technology was quite high, and that's quite interesting. We found that frontline workers, so you see almost 63%, were really excited about the opportunities that technology brought them. And in fact, when we looked into the detail of the survey, we actually found that technology ranked very highly from a satisfaction point of view. So pretty much just below pay. I mean, pay is always going to be up there. If you ask anybody, are you paid enough? They're mostly going to say no. The next one is typically my work-life balance. And then for frontline workers was technology. If you want to make me happy, adoption of technology is something that you need to consider. And then this is where it became quite nice when we started having a look at how technology can help bridge the gap between the frontline workers and what they're expecting, and how do we actually enable the frontline worker at the end of the day. And once again, you'll see there that frontline workers actually feared for the loss of their job if they didn't actually adopt new technologies, and if they didn't start skilling themselves up from a new technology point of view. And then the other thing is that they said is that many of the technologies they were adopting, they were having to learn themselves. So the employees weren't creating a system or weren't giving them enough training on these technologies, and they were having to really train themselves up. So that was frontline workers as three major trends. What I want to do is I want to move on to the work trend index. And this is the latest data that we released. We released this on the 22nd of September. It was done amongst 20,000 people globally. So you see there were 11 countries included. And really, if you think about where we are, we really are at a point now, if you look at leaders today, we are really struggling from a macroeconomic standpoint, and the pressures that we're starting to see. You just have to open up, or who opens up a newspaper, you have to go online and go and read online and see what is going on. But I think what we are starting to see is that 2 years down the line, I don't think we can actually agree, and nobody actually agrees on this flexible work thing. Has it worked? Hasn't it worked? And we've got a lot of leaders, by the way, within the organizations that are actually yearning back to that office life of 2019. And I think we've got empathy for both, right? The leaders that want to go back to 2019, we've got empathy for the employees who are actually now saying, I love the flexible way of working, and how do we bring these together? And I think at Microsoft, based on the research that we've seen, we believe that an energized, empowered employee is the way, and is the way to go, and is actually what's going to give us that competitive edge at the end of the day. So we then had a look at the work trend index. We used Microsoft 365 data, so we actually could see the data, and we can see the data when people work, etc., etc. We used a lot of the LinkedIn jobs data that we have, and also the Glint People Science surveys that were done at the time to actually come out with what we'll show you now. And we believe that there are three urgent pivots that came out of this data itself. And like we had in the beginning, we had what we called hybrid paranoia. We had the hybrid paradox. There's a new phase that we're now coining called the productivity paranoia. So what does that look like? And really, that is the call, is for leaders to end this hybrid or this productivity paranoia. And let me explain. So I think leaders worry that people are not being productive. And I have this discussion all the time, to be honest with you, and we get a lot of these. So what does it mean, Colin? Are people working when they're at home? How do we check up if they're working at home? Now, what is very interesting is if you look at this productivity paranoia, is we have, from the surveys, we have 87% of people saying to us, employees saying to us, that they are productive at work. And at work means either in the office or away from the office. And I think what is more is the productivity signals that we are seeing across Microsoft 365. So things like workday span, after hours work, weekend work, these really continue to climb. So the survey data of 87% saying they're more productive is being backed up by the data that we are starting to see. But I think at the same time, only 12% of leaders say that they're fully confident that their team is productive. So we now have this dichotomy, right? So we have people saying that they're working, we have signals saying that people are working more, but we have leaders within the organization saying that we are not fully confident in their team's productivity. So I think what this leads us to, if we think about it, is that I think we need to stop worrying about whether people are working enough and help them focus on what matters. And I think that's what it has come down to. Now that was the first one. I said there were 3 pivots that we needed to look at. I think the second pivot is that people or leaders need to embrace the fact that people come into the office for each other. Now, this is quite interesting. Remember, we had the worth it equation, and we were thinking about how do we make it worth people coming to work. And a lot of us invested in time and money and effort around the building, canteens, better Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what came out of it is that 73% of employees say that they need a better reason to come to the office other than just the policy. So we can go and enforce a policy and say, 2 days of the week, we want you to come to work. But employees are saying that's not the reason why they want to come to work. What is very interesting is that 85% of employees are motivated to come to work by rebuilding team bonds. So to make the office worth the commute, employees need a why. And it turns out that the why is each other. And that's what's come out of the surveys themselves. Now, the third pivot we talk about is that the data shows if employees can't learn, they'll leave. And companies, and we really believe now based on that feedback, is that companies need to build a learning culture. One where learning and growth are core to the employee's experience. And what we're finding now is that it's been a rough 2 years, right? And now is the moment, and I think we're talking about how do we re-recruit? How do we re-onboard and re-energize everybody? And we're looking at this inside of Microsoft as well with this lens to say, people may have been here 5, 10, 7, even 20 years in my case, but we are going, how do we put people through a re-recruiting and a re-onboarding phase so that we can understand what it is that they want. And it's very interesting. I would ask you to actually go and look at the actual stats and the video that was actually released. There's some very interesting stats there from LinkedIn where they are actually doing this themselves and they're going through this completely. There's some very interesting stats from LinkedIn also showing that, prior to the pandemic, if we looked, for instance, at remote work requirements, only 2% of people, or only 2% of the jobs that were posted were remote work requirements. Over the pandemic, that went up to 20, and we're actually seeing that starting to come down again to 15. So we're starting to see things normalize a little bit. We're also starting to see skills becoming more important. In the past, it was a case of where did an individual work, maybe. What we're starting to see is a lot more ask of specific skills to do a specific job or a specific role. So that really is the third one that we focused on, is how do we actually create a culture of learning and growth within the organization. That was the third major bullet point that came up. Just to back that up, 76% of employees say that they would actually stay longer at their company if the company invested in their learning and deployment. And I think what we also need to think about now is we thought about in the past potentially giving people a reason to join an organization. And I think what we now need to start looking at is giving them a reason to stay at the organization. That is also a major finding that also came out of the latest work trend index. Now, I'm going to hand over to Nick quite shortly, but this really was one of the major reasons Microsoft built what we called Microsoft Viva, which really is a set of products, and Nick will take us through some of them, that really helped or enabled organizations that address a lot of what we've spoken about through the adoption of technology. We call this the employee experience platform, and that really is what it is. It's a platform for the employee experience. Everything from how we communicate to our people, all the way down to how our managers at the end of the day are able to track the culture within organizations, are people at burnout, and managing their well-being itself. The one thing that the employees and managers did agree on out of the latest work trend index was communication. And you'll see that two things. I'll talk about the learning just for one last time, is that we actually saw that by creating clarity, and Nick, I don't know if Nick will take us through goals, but by creating clarity around our work priorities, so making sure that people have clarity around what their priorities are and how that is linked to the greater good of the organization, people were 4 times more likely to stay. And then the last one I'll share before I hand over to Nick was the clarity piece. And we found that by creating that clarity, this was actually one of the data points where both the employers, so the business decision makers, as well as the employees, actually agreed, was that effective communication is one of the major skills that we need to develop over the next couple of months in order to make sure that our employees remain happy and want to stay within our organizations. So I think that's it from my side. I think I'm just on the time, Nick. I don't want to take too much time from your side, but I think just a couple of bullet points as we go through that. So we started with hybrid paradox, so people wanting to stay at home but wanting to go to work. We then saw the worth it equation come out, and I think what we're now seeing is this priority, or is this productivity paranoia. That's the major trend that we see now, where managers are saying that we don't believe people are being productive. The data that we have says that people are productive. The data suggests that what we need to start doing is really making sure that we are creating a culture of learning within our organizations and development, and making sure that we are effectively communicating and almost re-onboarding and finding out and connecting with our employees what it is that's important to them. I think what Nick will do for us now is we've spoken a bit about how technology can enable this, and just 1 or 2 demo points as to what Microsoft Viva is and how we can actually enable some of these issues that we've spoken about.
100%. Thanks, Colin. So again, by way of introduction, again, my name is Nick Keane. I'm a director of solutions, and this solution is modern work. So for technology that incorporates the product set called Office and Microsoft 365. So yes, the Microsoft Viva is an employee experience engagement platform, and it leverages a lot of the signals that are going on in Office 365, Microsoft 365. Key thing I just want to, before we get into this platform, is really talk about where we're getting this data from. So, so what is, first of all, Office and Microsoft 365? It's our cloud productivity solution. I would imagine I've recognized some of the companies that have said hello on the chat, so thank you very much. I recognize that some of you are using Office 365, some of you may not be using Office 365 and are probably not so relevant towards you. But the purpose of the session is, again, just to highlight some of the technology that vendors like Microsoft are bringing for customers to use to understand how their employees are engaging, how they're working, and exactly that, employee engagement. So we often get customers that will ping us and say, hey, Microsoft, you brought out this really cool tool called Microsoft Viva, and I see it integrated into Office 365. Can I use it for monitoring my employees or spying on my employees? And the answer is no. This tool it will anonymize the data that basically it's collecting. It's not there to spy on employees and find out if they have the the red button on Microsoft Teams, but they're sleeping on the couch. so it's certainly not there to try and track and catch employees, right? It's there really for leaders to gain insights and or to drive what Colin highlighted, for example, learning, and we'll cover learning shortly, but learning so that you can, reinvest in the employee and continue to grow them. So we have a piece of technology out there in the cloud, because Office 365 is a cloud collaboration software, and it's called Microsoft Graph. Now, what Graph is doing is it's collecting all these signals. And again, please remember, we are anonymizing the data. So I don't have access to your data if you're using Office 365 or any other customer. And I really want to reiterate this point that the signaling that's going on is anonymized. And so we don't know who's doing what, but what we're doing is we're collecting statistics as to, for example, how many meetings, how many overlap meetings, how long did that meeting run for? And we can certainly pick up if an employee, for example, is in meetings all the time, but happens to continue to chat on Microsoft Teams, or distracted, opens up a browser and starts to browse the internet. So we have statistics, for example, to be able to measure useful meetings, and then pass that information back to a manager to say, hey, you know what, maybe reconsider actually setting up your meeting time, your agenda. Is this meeting actually important? Or how about just even think about canceling it because it doesn't seem to be having the impact that it should have. So this slide, and then I'm going to share my screen and go to more of a demo, really talks to the platform expansion in Microsoft Viva. And some of you on this call may be exposed to Microsoft Viva. You might actually be using Microsoft Viva, or you might have been using some of the free components that we provide within the Office and Microsoft 365 based on potential subscriptions that you might have. The solution has evolved. It was originally called Workplace Analytics, which then got renamed into Viva Insights, and you can see the actual module there. Second pillar there for Insights, and Viva Insights sitting there. But as such, we, as Microsoft being a software vendor, supplying software for industry to use, we have continued to expand this platform as we've seen a lot of demand around this cultural transformation, and what are some of the tools that can help understand what's going on. Again, this certainly is not a tool that will actually do the cultural transformation for you. It's a tool that will assist leaders in making the right decisions moving forward, and also for the employee to gain better access to information, connections, content, etc. So we're breaking it down into Connection, which is Viva Engage, Viva Amplify, Insights, which are Viva Insights, Viva Pulse, Viva Goals, and then on the right under Growth, Viva Topics and Viva Learning. Now, not all of this is available. You will see this completing from a platform perspective. I'm going to be talking and showing some of these components and referring back to the history of where they've come from. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go off camera because I'm going to use the screen just to really share my screen now. And I'm just going to switch to my actual live screen. And hopefully you guys can all see my screen. Colin, if you can just acknowledge, please.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So what I'm actually demonstrating here is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is our hub for collaboration. And inside here, we have, you know, some of you may be using...
Nick?
Yes?
You just want to switch on your camera there.
Oh, sorry. I'll switch it back on. I'll switch the camera back on so you guys can see me as well. No problem. Perfect. All right. So what I wanted to really do is just, this is in the context of Microsoft Teams. Many of you, if you are using Office 365 or Microsoft 365, are using Teams for the hub of collaboration. So you'll be familiar with chats and calendars and Teams, etc. Underneath Teams, where would you find this? Is you'll find apps, right? So what Teams is more than just a unified communications product for you to engage and chat and talk to other people and or do conferences like this one. Underneath there, we have apps, and we have integrated many third-party applications. And of course, some of them are native to Microsoft, and some of them are third-party, and we certainly encouraging the greater ecosystem for them to add more applications into Microsoft Teams. So Teams becomes the hub or the landing page for entire organizations to collaborate from and or launch their business productivity or business applications. So underneath the apps, you'll actually find Viva if you have and you're using Microsoft Teams, and it'll come up in the form of these modules, which you saw in that slide earlier. The first one that I'm showing here is a solution set called Viva Connections, and Viva Connections is effectively the landing page, and it will become the landing page for everything that's going to go on inside an organization. So really what it allows us to do is it will go and source news feeds, data points, tasks, or anything that's basically going on within an organization. And that will then be filtered through using AI engines curated for the actual person and delivered through for them to have a consistent, singular landing page where a lot of information around what's going on in the organization will actually start to filter through. The concept is it will come through in these what they call adaptive cards. And on the back end, of course, together with the IT shop or the IT department within the organization, they will work with how do they curate these adaptive cards, what is the content, what are the topics, what is relevant, and be able to pass this through, allowing the employee to then create their own custom dashboards. So they will then build this out so that they will, have their specific unique experience. They will see content that's relevant to them. They will see topics that they want to see and news feeds that may be, pertinent to what's going on within the organization. So for example, here you have information about who the company is, the brands, what the company stands for, and the people. So, just general information about what's going on within the organization. So Connections is really aggregating all of the information, the events, the content, the tasks that are going on within an organization and giving it to you in a singular landing page delivered through Viva Connections. Another really cool tool that we're starting to see is we have recently announced a module called Viva Engage. Now, where's Viva Engage's history coming from? We introduced a product set originally called Yammer, and some of you may actually be using Yammer. So in Yammer, and how do I describe? So if I really, really had to break down what Viva Engage looks like, and let me actually click on something here. And this is very, very basic. I'd love to show you my own Viva Engage experience in Microsoft, but some people are posting some interesting comments. But ultimately, what you'll see with Viva Engage is a very similar structure and feed like Facebook. And often a Yammer and now Viva Engage can be equated to being Facebook for enterprise. So where people are familiar with using the social media tools like Facebook, they can have a very similar experience and thereby create the communities that are of interest to them. So for example, if they wanted to have a CEO connection, Ask HR, All Company, Sales Best Practices, these are the different communities that exist. So as I go down through Viva Engage, I come down here and I can actually now post. So you can see, and please understand that this is a bit of a demo environment, so I do apologize of the information that you'll see in here. You'll see some interesting little posts, but it's pretty much just basic information, just demonstrating the functionality. And you can see how a person can post questions, post comments. Hey, I don't like the canteen food today, and making a comment or making a suggestion within a fairly open forum where they can actually then go and make comments and suggestions. And likewise, if I wanted to write a comment, I can then say, you know, I'd like to write a comment about this, very similar to the experience that you get within the Facebook environment. So this Viva Engage is the adaptation of Yammer, and Yammer is a technology that's been included within the Office or Microsoft 365 product stable. And some of you are familiar with it. You might have remembered to go to Yammer. You would go to an external website. Now Viva Engage gives this to you within Teams as a singular module for you to be able to deliver this experience. Another important thing that Colin mentioned, and on the growth side of items, is a module called Viva Learning. Now, as Colin highlighted, that one metric there that people would consider leaving an organization if they can't develop or they can't learn. So Viva Learning is a module that really aggregates a whole lot of different learning or LMSs within an organization. Now, the bigger the organization, you can imagine what we have is LMS sprawl. We start to see, you know, organizations with different learner management systems. Some of them, obviously, the very popular ones that are out there, Udemy, and you know, there's a myriad, and I'll show you some of those providers shortly. So what Viva Learning will do is it will connect to disparate LMSs, and it's got native connectors out of the box that allow you to connect to the various LMS solutions within an organization. And the big enterprises within South Africa, we're starting to see, as I said, LMS sprawl. We see some of the large enterprises with 1, 2, or 3 different LMS solutions that have crept into the different departments. Now, you know, this is disparate, and they've got different learning. Some departments have subscribed to LinkedIn Learning. Some people are going SuccessFactors or Udemy or various other things like that. And you know, where do you go to actually go and do your training and learning, and what's interesting? How do I go and find information for me to actually go and do some learning? So the interesting things is you can just see quickly here, this is now aggregating some of the learning. It's telling me that I recently viewed 20, I recommended was 18 courses have been recommended to me by other people, and bookmarked are 85. As I said, this is a demo environment, and I'm not the only person playing around with this. So of course, people are, you know, making changes here. So if I go edit on pick my interests, I can come here, and again, you can see a list of keywords that define the interests for me as an employee. So again, this is very technically focused. I can come here and say, oh, I'm also interested in accounting. And I can go and pick my topics so that when Viva Learning goes and searches through the catalogs of courses, it will then start to bubble up the courses that match those keywords. So if I go down here, now I can browse by my interests. I can also now search by my providers. Now, my providers are exactly that. What we are doing is we are, as I said, connecting to third-party LMSs that the organization may have invested in. So it will then connect via the connected to that LMS, and it will actually bring those courses into Viva Learning for me to actually select. So here's Go One. There's shared Viva experience there. There's Coursera, edX, and InfoSec, and so you go on around the different LMSs. We also, you know, some organizations may have a paid-for subscription to LinkedIn Learning. It will bring all of the LinkedIn Learning courses through, but out of the box, Viva Learning will offer 125 free LinkedIn courses for people to use, and that we can provide the documentation as to what those courses are. So 125 out of the box. We also provide this connector, which is the Microsoft 365 training. So if the organization's using Microsoft 365, how does the user get the best possible use out of 365? This training is free for them. And we also provide access to Microsoft Learn. As you can see, a lot of different courses that are available here. So really, I mean, what happens if there's courseware or course material that you would like to bring into here that's not got an LMS or the connectors not typically there. We can actually take courseware and we can put it into SharePoint as a SharePoint list, and we can connect to that SharePoint list and deliver the learning here. Now, when it comes down to how do we track and what do we do, if I go to the My Learning, again, I can see bookmarked. Here's the little bookmark. I can come along and I can bookmark courses for myself. I can come back to recommended to you. Now, as a manager, and that's the next tab there, under recommended to you is typically my manager or my organization may have said, due to compliance, corporate governance, whatever it is, we absolutely would like you to do this course. So recommended to you, you know, these are courses that are typically being recommended to me, and then recently viewed courses, things that I have clicked on but may not have taken any action. And then completed is a summary of the catalog of the courses that I typically may have completed. Manage will allow me to then go and manage this. And the really cool thing with managing a course is where I can actually go and recommend to. So because I'm a manager in this instance, I can actually come along here and say, I'd like this course to be recommended to a particular individual, and I can go ahead and schedule that course for that person. One of the nice things with Viva Learning also is the automatic ability to schedule a course or find a slot in my diary. You know, time is so precious. So if I find something that I'm really interested in, and I'd like to actually go ahead and, you know, add it to my calendar, what it will actually do is it will make suggestions. At this point in time, no suggestions are available, and I can play around with my calendar. So it will say, well, this course, let's say it was a 90-minute course or whatever it happened to be, 1 hour, 30-minute course. It will actually go and look into my Outlook calendar, find a slot for me, and it will actually, you know, place that in, bookmark it for me. So I don't have to go and, oh, I'd like to do this course, go and, you know, bookmark it and then go to my calendar and add the manual entry. It's all seamless, and it adds it more in fairly seamlessly. All right. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to click on and move from Viva Learning to, well, let me click on Viva Goals. Viva Goals is an acquisition that Microsoft did. So these refer to objective and key results metrics that the organization or person can actually go out and set for themselves. So Viva Goals allows a person to actually have a look at what are the organizational OKRs, so the objective and key results that might be set for the organization. So the organization might set our OKRs or grow our top line revenue, employee retention, mergers and acquisitions. What could typically be the objectives that the organizations are trying to achieve, and what are the key results that are going to be the measures at that? So how do we actually track progress? How does it actually work within this dummy organization, Contoso Electronics? So you can have a look at the organization's OKRs, and you can also then go look at your personal OKRs and set your own OKRs for your organization, right? So you'd set your objectives and you'd set your measures from a key results output, and then you track it within the singular tool that allows you to then measure the outputs, and are you actually keeping track of it? Of course, there's reporting attached to this, as you can see on the right-hand side here, where this progress is behind, at risk, or it's on track. And all of these can then be defined, reported on, and pulled out. Last but not least, I actually just want to talk a little bit about a biggie, really relating to what Colin was talking a lot about, and that's how do we actually handle and manage our employees. So Viva Insights, which originally was called Workplace Analytics, and the Viva Insights Personal, if you are an Office 365 customer, you'll go and see that you may have access to Viva Insights, which is personal for yourself. and it allows me to then go and see how I'm working, how effectively I'm working. So some of the interesting things, and in this instance, in this example, I am a manager. So you may see things that you don't see underneath your own environment, but it allows me to just quickly scroll down and really understand employee health a little bit better. So when I come down here, I can actually see, 33% of employees met with their manager one-on-one for less than an hour per month. It allows me to then, explore more, click on it, and go and understand what that actually means to me. Before we actually get there, one of the things I wanted to actually just highlight quickly, and that is my actual team. Now, by default, my team membership is built from Office 365, so all of these team members would be populated automatically for you. But of course, if I wanted to, I can actually go along here and I can add team members manually. And that team then is what I'm looking at, understanding what's going on in the environment. Just whilst I'm in settings, I can also set up things like virtual commute. In the physical world pre-COVID, I went to the office and I would probably end of my day, 4:30, 5:30, and I'd prepare myself mentally to get into my car. What music am I going to listen to? Or am I going to jump on a conference call? And I'm going to do a commute. A virtual commute is the concept of letting the employee shut down and start to undo the tasks or, complete the tasks so that they can wrap up the day. So really great for hybrid, allowing people to not just continue to work all the way through to 8 o'clock at night, as I'm sure many of you experienced in the height of COVID. Protect time, again, just setting up, send reminders to clear conflicts on no meeting days, and I'll show you the no meeting day shortly. You can go and tell Viva Insights which day is your no meeting day. And again, of course, you can override that, but it's going to help you manage that a little bit better. Reflection, which is your schedule for reflecting on how you're feeling. It's important that the organization understands, be it managers or employees, how people are feeling, and gaining that insights. Praise, something we don't do often enough. Myself as a people manager, I manage 12 people within Microsoft, and certainly I think we can offer praise more often. And this little tool here would actually then promote people to offer up that praise more effectively, more often to somebody. So I'm going to go back to the home screen, and here, for example, how are you feeling? So reflecting. So how am I feeling today? Feeling okay, and just building that culture of emotional awareness, allowing people to express they had a bad day or they're having a bad moment, and they can come in and very bad, and we can quickly see, or individual can quickly see, what is the reflection history that's going on. And of course, managers would be able to then pick that up on a organizational wide trend, and then act on it. Why are people coming in? Is it the traffic? Is it the factors that our policy is forcing them to come back to the physical office, to what Colin was highlighting earlier? All right, there's the virtual commute, ready to wrap up my day. And then here's the send praise. So it will prompt me to send praise more often, and I can simply click on a person and send them a quick praise. Who do I want to send praise to? And want to say, okay, cool, I really enjoyed your optimism, and I'm going to send praise out to you very quickly. Going down here, stay connected. As a manager, it's important that we are having one-on-one time. I'm not just disappearing, and I'm not connecting with people. So, we're going and having those one-on-one connects with everybody. My no meetings day, try and make that Wednesday in Microsoft, to be completely honest. Doesn't often work, but certainly we try for a no meeting day. What that means is no internal meetings. Of course, being a customer-centric organization, we will always prioritize customer meetings. Here's an interesting one, right? So effective meetings. Now, we sit in back-to-back meetings most of the time. And what it allows me to do is really go and have a look at my meetings. So I can categorize my meetings, I can have a look at those meetings and, you know, go and see what's basically going on in my organization. So here, over the last 4 weeks, you had 30 minutes of one-on-one time with 4 out of my 15 team members. Again, this is a demo environment, so please don't judge me. And I can come down here and I can see team meeting habits. So again, anonymizing the data that's going on in my organization and pulling those metrics in and delivering it through to me. So what did I have? No overlap with other meetings, okay? RSVP to invites, which is always good. So I clicked accept and I sent the reply back. Meeting was less than 1 hour and I didn't multitask. Well, I don't know how that's possible. I think most of us, unfortunately, are guilty of multitasking because there's so much going on, especially in virtual meetings. I'm doing email or I'm responding to somebody else that's pinged me on the side. And, you know, certainly, again, it's not there to report on people to say this person's multitasking too much. I don't know who that was. I don't know who was actually doing that. And, but I can see how much of my team or my organization is starting to do that. If I wanted to go down and have a look at my meetings and I can say, okay, well, I've actually can see the list of meetings. These would be my meetings that I've set up and I can say, you know, what's going on and I can start to make a decision that my meeting is a little bit ineffective and I'd need to make, you know, maybe make some adjustments. How I impacted my team members, you know, am I one of those managers that pick up the phone at 7 o'clock at night and start phoning my employees, or I'm sending emails on the weekend telling them to do stuff by Monday morning? You know, this will actually tell me how I'm impacting team members in the quiet hours, right? So the quiet hours, obviously after, let's say 5 o'clock and on weekends. And I can see in this example that, yes, I am impacting, and sometimes we do need to impact our employees, but at least I can see and I can do something proactively about it by reducing that. Or if I'm going to send an email on the weekend, I can actually set it for delayed send and make sure that, you know, it's going off on a particular Monday morning 8 o'clock time frame. Organizational trends now allows me as a manager, as a leader within an organization, to really now take more of a macro view as to what's going on in the organization. So here at outcomes, meetings, effectiveness, and starts to give me the data across the entire organization. Decisions making meetings, 82% long meetings, 9% long and large meetings, and 6% large meetings. Right? Putting too many people together becomes an ineffective meeting. Plus, you look at the cost of, you know, the total cost of all of those employees. Is that actually worthwhile for the organization? So I can scroll down here and quickly it will then prompt me with recommendations, right? Unlocking more insights and utilizing well-connected employees to spread information, right? So employees that are in the know and are, you know, let's call them positive, can actually be leveraged for us to you know, excite other employees about information and or events in an organization. Notice here on the top, I've got download PowerPoint. So if you're needing as an HR representative, HR director, manager, you can quickly download this into a PowerPoint and then present it through to other leadership. Interesting here, it shows me how many of my employees are working outside of their working hours, but they're collaborating, right? Which means they're phoning each other, they're having calls, they're sharing content. And I would need to question, sure, why are people getting down to a level where they're needing to collaborate after hours? Do we not make enough time internally for them to collaborate, or they're not meeting each other? And how do I drive that better so that I can free up their quiet time? Capacity allowing time to focus on individual deliverables. So what we would call focus time, where you can pop focus time into your calendar and it will actually mute people phoning, it will mute instant messages popping up in that disturbance. Although there is an exception list and you can actually go and override some of that information. All right, other things like that, manager connection, coaching, engage with directs through regular one-on-one meetings. So the system is going to measure that I am regularly connecting in a one-on-one with my employees, and it's going to give me that if I'm starting to drop because I'm getting too busy, you know, it's going to say, hey, take some action here. you want to connect with your employees more regularly to keep that connection, keep that feedback loop bi-directional. Meeting effectiveness, again, just having a look at what I showed you earlier as to whether or not my meetings are good or bad. And how do I improve meetings? Do I shorten the time, create better agendas and things like that so that I can improve the overall meeting effectiveness? So Viva Insights, again, is collecting the signals of how people are working, right? I've showed you some of the modules of Viva. So learning is more, I'm learning, and I've got this connection to all my learning content within my organization. Viva Goals is setting those OKRs for my organization and measuring against those. Viva Insights is gaining information as to how my employees are working and providing those insights to the leadership that allows them to potentially make changes that overall will improve the employees' happiness and hopefully then start to amend culture. It's not this rat race and feared environment and causing these metrics. So by peering into these metrics, hopefully organizations can make better decisions around their employees. So with that, I'm aware I've probably taken more than my fair share of time. Let me hand it back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Colin, you can come back on camera. Nick, you can stop sharing your screen. We don't have much time left. We've got about 4 minutes before the end of the session, but we do have questions that I can run to quickly before we close. Just a quick one. Nick Masinyane asked, is Yammer called Viva Engage now?
So great question. Yammer will continue as it is, but there are some enhancements to Yammer that is now becoming Viva Engage. So Engage is actually a slightly enhanced Yammer solution, but effectively, yes, Engage is the evolution of Yammer.
All right, and then Shivani Govender asked about the cost. I mean, we've all seen how amazing this tool is. I think everybody in the webinar can agree that this is something that can really revolutionize the way you manage your hybrid workforce.
Yeah.
But cost is the tricky part. I think, Colin, you've addressed it in the chat to say, it varies depending on what your requirements are. But can you just give us an overall answer?
Sure.
Yeah, so
go for it.
Colin, do you want to go? Sorry?
No, you're the salesperson, so I might get it wrong.
Okay.
So yes, there is a cost to the entire platform. We do offer various modules as independent, but by the time you're looking at some of the Viva modules, we actually then provide the entire platform at a cost. Now, what is that cost? You can go and have a look on the internet. And in South African rands, it was around about 160 rand per user per month. But again, that is full suggested retail price. Really depends on your organization, their current situation with Microsoft or with a partner organization if you're supplying. So again, I can't give a definitive price because it really depends from customer to customer.
And the only bit I would add there, Sangula, is that some customers may already have access to some of the modules that Nick showed. So Viva Connections, as an example, are reliant on underlying technologies that the customer may already own. So it's actually good to go and check in with your IT team because you may already be able to deploy some of the technologies that you saw today.
Absolutely. Some of these modules, as I said, like personal insights, and some people probably realize that Viva Insights is working. Some of the team members on the call might realize that they're getting a thing called personal digest email every, let's say, Monday, pops into your inbox, and you can click on it and it'll tell you some of these insights. And that's actually personal insights working for you.
All right, that brings us to 12 o'clock. I'd like to thank everyone for joining this webinar. Colin, Nick, I think we all benefit quite substantially from having you both. I was, some of the stats that you revealed or the findings of the Work Trend Index were a little mind-blowing. I mean, the particular one about only 12% of managers being convinced that the employees were being productive was one that stands out for me. But I think based on the chat, many people agree that we are still in a place where organizations and leaders have not been trained to fully be capable of managing people virtually. And maybe that's a conversation for another day. Other than that, I'd like to say thanks to everyone. Regarding the report, there was one person who asked for a link. I put a link to the report in the chat, but you can also go just Google 2023 Microsoft Work Trends report, and it will take you directly to the latest report. I believe Colin has also asked you to send questions, if you have any, to sahybridwork@microsoft.com. So if you have any further questions, you can also direct your questions there. Otherwise, any unanswered questions I will share with the panelists after today's conversation. So thank you. Have a great day and a week further. And I look forward to our next engagement. Cheers.